Good evening, everyone. Welcome to UE Open Campus Grenada and to the second annual Reparations Lecture for 2022. I now turn you over to Dr. Nicole Philip Dow, who will give the welcome remarks. She's joining us virtually.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you're hearing me loud and clear. It is my pleasure to be welcoming you this evening. Unfortunately, I cannot be in the same room with everyone else due to the joys of COVID-19. But in spite of all of that, I just want to say welcome to Dr. Francis Severin, Pro Vice Chancellor and Principal of the University of the West Indies Open Campus, Mrs. Roxy McLeach Hutchinson, Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ambassador Ali Gill, Chairman of the Grenada National Reparations Commission, other members of the Commission with us this evening, moderator and distinguished panelists, Dr. Damian Grieves, Mrs. Kizzy Henry Cadet, Ms. Tesfa Peterson, Ms. Laura Trevelyan, Mr. Dunbar Campbell, and Mr. Angus Martin. To students and teachers from the Grenville Secondary School, Presentation Brothers College, St. Andrew's Anglican Secondary, St. David's Catholic, St. Joseph Convent St. George's, St. Joseph Convent Grenville, T.A. Marshall Community College, Wesley College, Westmoreland Secondary, ladies and gentlemen joining us virtually, good evening and a very warm welcome. It gives me great honor and pleasure to welcome you to this second annual Reparations Lecture. The lecture is a collaborative venture between the Grenada National Reparations Commission and the University of the West Indies Open Campus. This matter of reparations has been debated for a number of years. In many cases, it has been left simmering on the back burner as we attend to seemingly more important matters. However, in recent times, it has come to the fore, both locally, regionally, and internationally, in the wave of Black Lives Matter movement and in our recent protests in the Caribbean against the visits of the royals. The matter of reparations is a present one. It's not dead. It's something that's in our face every single day. As we look at our landscape that is littered with tangible reminders of the period of enslavement, whether it's a watermill, a windmill, a copper, all of these are reminders of the excruciating pain, the suffering, the hardships, the loss of life, the humiliation, and the loss of identity of our forefathers. The idea of reparations, the matter of reparations is very much alive. Now we need to seek a pathway to understanding what reparations means. We need to engage persons from all walks of life in our community as we tease out how do we see reparations in Grenada. The Grenada National Reparations Commission was established by a cabinet conclusion on the 15th of March 2021. The formation of the commission is part of a CARICOM mandate. Grenada was the last of the CARICOM states to fulfill this mandate. But in spite of this, like my principal would say, we hit the ground running in our quest to fulfill our commitment to public advocacy. So last May, we held our first or our inaugural reparations lecture ably presented by Dr. Ron Daniels. We have approached the government of Grenada to establish a committee to complete research on the renaming of our streets and villages along the lines of our forefathers and their accomplishments. And we're hopeful that this can be done for the 50th anniversary of Grenada's independence. In April, we reached out to our head of state requesting a meeting with the royal couple who was scheduled to visit Grenada. Of course, when they declined, it caused quite a stir, not only in Grenada, but in the UK as well. Today, we gather to examine the period of enslavement and to ask, how do we see reparations for Grenada? For the Commission and for the UWI, it was imperative that we hear the voices of young people, that we engage them because it's their future as well. And so we really warmly welcome the students from the secondary schools and from the T.A. Marshall Community College who have joined us today. 2 weeks ago, the BBC documentary Grenada, Confronting the Past was aired. BBC correspondent Laura Trevelyan and producer Coralie Barreau delved into Grenada's colonial past, its legacy of enslavement, and the question of reparatory justice. Today, we would look at excerpts from this documentary as we discuss Grenada's path to reparatory justice. I invite you to listen, to engage, and to ask questions of the panelists as we seek to address this matter of reparatory justice for Grenada. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, I welcome you to this evening's proceedings. Thank you.
We now have a poem, "Cause We Black," presented by Rose Bagwan, a UE Open Campus student.
Good afternoon, everyone. This poem is entitled, "'Cause We Black." Is 'cause we black. The way we are treated is embedded in our melanin, marrying black with bad, and everyone is scared of the darkness. Scared of us because intertwined in our DNA is ferociousness, carelessness, and laziness, right? Because ever since we crossed this sea like some washed up has-beens, we see this thing as a burden. A sin to be seen in this skin, trained to despise who we are and idolize who they are. The superior, master of all things desirable. They want us because we were strong, but Massa was wrong. We were as weak as the excuses they used to justify our captivity. Christianity conveniently bent to suit their immortality. See, it wasn't the shackles that had us, and they knew it. It wasn't their preaching about the divine. See, the chains were mere accessories to the fit because what they imprisoned was our minds. That was the strategy, to capture us. Not until slavery was abolished, but for an eternity. And over time, we tightened the twine around our mind as we began to teach our kin to hate their skin, despite all the hashtag glowing in this melanin, because our mind is still dripping with what has been. Is 'cause we black. Our need to succeed has been suppressed. Our ancestors refused to remain oppressed, but here we are, bending over and taking branding slaves to the brand name, caned into being okay with the new drug injected in our system. We have forgotten our roots, and our kunta kinte energy has been transferred into infirmity. Our name is now Toby. And we are molded into the perfectly sized bowl to hold on to the pain of long ago. Now we have adopted their culture, is either you're fair or you're bleaching in order to fit in. Nice hair or chemicals to straighten out our flaws, because we need some heavy editing before posting our faces out in public, still captured, growing and glowing, sun-kissed and loving my skin, but we are still careful that society doesn't get too tainted by our tint. They are no longer scared of the darkness because no black is afraid of black empowerment. No, those are our chains. Is it because we black? We can't move past our past, not forgetting, but the blame game we playing is getting quite stale. Black is not an excuse anymore. It is not a label for bad, a tag they attach to every black child as if born into a stereotype, a box of some kind, and somehow we believe that by crying, the key would mysteriously pop up. Still claiming to be a pack of kings and queens, but we are the biggest jokers as we struggle to squeeze ourselves into what we feel society wants us to be, but in reality, aren't we society? It's not the outward appearance we need to change. It's not a physical alteration, it's a state of mind modification that needs to occur. In case you haven't noticed, our skin moves with us. So the hindrance is not the shackles of our ancestors, the whips from their overseers, or the rape by their masters. It's us. But what do we do about it? Sit back and say, it's 'cause we black, 'cause we black. But it's not 'cause we black we have to claim victimization, or 'cause we black our destination is where we are now, 'cause we black we have to maintain our reputation as bad, 'cause we black. Drop the label. Pick back up the power and work together. Because this segregation thing is tiring, and we're only breaking each other down. It's not black versus white, black versus black, black versus the world. It's people growing together and creating a future not dictated by what happened, but guided by it. Martin Luther had a dream, and we're still in it, sleeping on it, dreaming of better days as if it's not up to us to construct it. The law freed our minds, our bodies, but it's time we free our minds. Untie that knot, because it is not 'cause we black. Thank you.
Every time Rose says this poem, I get goosebumps, and I find little nuggets that I didn't hear before every time she says it. Thank you so very much, Rose. At very short notice, you came and did this poem for us. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Oh yes, and I must say she is a UWI student, so we're flaunting ourselves. All right, we're going to move on to talking about a little bit about our panelists for today. We have our moderator, Dr. Damian Grieves. Dr. Grieves is a professor of social sciences in the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences, School of Art Sciences of the St. George's University. He's also Associate Dean of the School of Arts and Sciences and responsible for strategic initiatives and administration. He acted as a member of the cabinet-appointed preparatory committee on establishing the National Reparations Commission for Grenada, and he's also an advisor to the Grenada National Reparations Commission. He's a former parliamentarian and Minister of Government of St. Lucia, Dr. Damian Grieves. Our panelists, some of whom are not here with us, Mr. Dunbar Campbell. Dunbar Campbell grew up in Grenada, where he attended the Grenada Boys Secondary School He served in the U.S. Marine Corps in the East Coast states of the U.S., Japan, and Hawaii before attending the University of Maryland, the University of Hawaii. He has a bachelor's degree in political science and a master's degree in economics. He served as a research director for the Texas Workers' Compensation Scheme for 10 years and has written 3 Grenada novels, Blood of Belvedere, The Bianca Sea Still Burns, and the much acclaimed Winds of Fenor. Dumba Campbell, affectionately called DC. Laura Trevelyan, who was supposed to be here, but unfortunately, the joys of the pandemic. Laura is an anchor and correspondent for BBC World News, who has reported for BBC News for 30 years. Laura was a political correspondent covering the UK Parliament before moving to New York to be at the United Nations correspondent and traveling around the world with UN Beat. Laura has anchored the World News America since 2012, reporting live from Cuba, Haiti, Mexico, and across the US. Ladies and gentlemen, Laura Trevelyan. John Angus Martin is a historian, archivist, researcher, and affiliated fellow of Carib Trails under Dr. Corien Hoffman, Leiden University, the Netherlands. He has a multidisciplinary academic background and diverse experiences that enhances a landscape approach to his work. Though he specializes in history of colonialism and slavery in Grenada, Mr. Martin explores Caribbean identity and historical relationships in the archaeological space. He is currently pursuing a PhD in heritage management at the Faculty of Archaeology at Leiden University, at the Netherlands, looking at landscape history, representation, memory, and identity in Grenada. He's author of several books on Grenada, including A to Z of Grenada's heritage, Island Caribs and French Settlers in Grenada. Mr. John Angus Martin. Mrs. Kizzy Henry Cadet holds a bachelor's degree in history with first-class honors from the University of the West Indies Cave Hill campus, Barbados, and an MA in International Heritage Management from the University of Birmingham, UK. She is currently pursuing a Master of Education degree at St. George's University, Grenada. Mrs. Henry Cadet has been an educator for the last 19 years. She loves teaching, and her main goal as an educator is to ensure that her students receive a transformative learning experience in her classroom. Mrs. Kizzy Henry Cadet. Ms. Tesfa Peterson. Tesfa Peterson is currently a PhD candidate in the Humanities Department at Concordia University, Montreal, Canada. Her current work is tentatively titled Diaspora, Reverberations, and Community Groundings. She is currently working in her home communities of Chantimel and Montreal to develop a diasporic project that incorporates oral histories and heritage preservation as the basis of community education and transformation. Tesfa has worked for many years in community education and activism. She believes passionately in the importance of community collaboration as a critical feature of intellectual life. Ms. Tesfa Peterson. These are our panelists and moderator for this evening's proceedings. So I turn over to them. I place you in their very, very capable hands. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mistress Dr. Nicole Philip Dow. I don't know if we need a mic. Do I need a mic, sir? Because I know my voice is not very good. Right. So good afternoon, everybody. Good evening again. We had an engagement with you, the students, so everybody should be relaxed now. It's not on yet, but it's on now. Thank you. Thank you for the introductions and thank you for everybody who is here this evening. We want to say a special shout out to Rose Bagwan. Give her a round of applause. Wow. The radio and the Caribbean are in good hands with our young people. And some of the questions and comments we had today were really, really very good as well. And I want to thank you, and also our older folks who also made very good contributions as we kept the atmosphere light and stress-free before the big thing. Right, so it's about reparations. It's about history. It's about our history. It's about our story. It's about reparations in terms of justice, or justice in terms of reparations, or what we say, reparatory justice. We are going to be bringing you so much information today, and we hope we have the time to basically relay this information. We are going to have some snippets or some excerpts from that wonderful documentary. In fact, I think it should be an award-winning or a prize-winning documentary, because it was really beautifully put together. And I want to, all of the stars were there. Dr. Nicole Dow, give her a round of applause, please. Laura was there, give her a round of applause. DC was there. Grenada was there. Big shout out for Grenada. Absolutely. Absolutely. So therefore, let's move on and see, let's go on to the first one, the first snippet or the first excerpt, where we look at the instruments of torture. And those of you who may be a little bit, I don't want to say kizzy, but queasy, squeamish on that, please forgive us. It's not the intention, but we will first of all view that, and then we will get our BBC star, Laura, to lead off the discussion, looking at her family and the absentee slave owners. Can I have that snippet, please?
Our popular tourist destination. But there's no escaping the past.
Nicole, can you tell us about these objects?
Yes, so these are shackles, and these would have been used on children. So little hands are expected to fit in here, and they would be sort of bound like this.
Yeah. And what is this, Nicole?
A form of torture. It's a neck collar. So if the enslaved, for whatever reason, was disobedient, this, as you see, it's padlocked. It would be opened, placed around the person's neck. And the moving of your head would have been almost impossible. So this one would be the whip. Notice, because it's plaited leather, it means that whenever you got hit by this, more than likely it's going to tear the flesh. And you have instances of slaves being beaten, receiving as much as 100 lashes.
So all of this in front of us, how would you sum up what you've showed us?
I would say forms and mediums of control. It's an actual process of ensuring that this labor is not only free, but it's also controlled, so that that labor does exactly what is asked of them and produces as much as possible, so that there can be realization of wealth.
It's making me feel physically sick, the way that you describe that. It's like a system of profit built off torture.
For an absentee planter who has never set foot in one of these islands, were they aware of the brutality of slavery, or were they aware but just turn a blind eye because there's profits coming from this? Or is it that they genuinely did not know the extent of this? It really opens those questions.
So there you have it. Let's invite Laura to give us some of her information, how she feels about this, and in her discussion of her family as absentee slave owners. Laura?
Thank you, Damian, and thank you, everybody. And I should say, I'm so sorry not to be with you, and I'm so pleased to see so many students from Grenada in the audience. I should say that I love Grenada, and wild horses wouldn't keep me away, but unfortunately, COVID did. So I contracted COVID earlier in the week, so I can't be with you, and I'm so sorry, because I would love to see you all again. And I guess I would just say that for me, as someone who in Britain was taught that the British abolished slavery and that this was somehow one of our great achievements to abolish slavery, what was really always glossed over was the fact that, of course, we endorsed slavery and we were slave owners. So to come face to face with the way that this very efficient but very brutal system worked was really shocking to me. And what was most shocking of all, actually, were the tiny shackles that Nicole showed us that were made for children, because it was that brought home that children were kidnapped from West Africa too and brought up in enslavement. And so much thought went into their captivity to the extent of making these tiny, tiny shackles. Some blacksmith made those. And it's always the details which get you, I find, with any form of, extreme punishment. And it was that which I found really gobsmacking. So I would just like to thank Nicole so much, and DC, for opening my eyes to everything and for making me realize that the past informs the present, and that you can't get away from the fact that even though slavery was abolished nearly 200 years ago, as Sir Hilary Beckles told me, the Vice Chancellor of the University of the West Indies, slavery is our living present, and our grandparents in the Caribbean can remember our great-grandparents who were slaves. And that is extraordinary and shows you the extent to which the past informs the present.
Thank you very much, Laura. Thank you so much. I could see that coming from the heart, and wow, that must have been some experience for you right here in the Spice Isle of Grenada. Let us go on to our second documentary, looking at that snippet, and this time we want to look at the Beau Séjour Great House, where DC Campbell will feed us with some information, present some of that information to us. Can we move on to that second snippet, please?
Over the slave plantation, the sugar plantation.
At Beau Séjour, I met the second of my guides, the historical novelist D.C. Campbell, who grew up on Grenada. D.C. explained what life was like for the slaves shipped here from West Africa by the colonial powers to harvest the valuable sugarcane.
To the left, we would have seen the windmill turning, and those would have the big rollers that would crush the sugar canes. Very dangerous work, because the rollers, when you're feeding the rollers with the sugar cane, if your fingertip gets caught, it's the beginning. Because your finger pulls your hand, and then your hand, your shoulder, and then your entire body. And there are cases of entire bodies being crushed in those machines. There's just not enough time to stop it. So the solution at that time was to have a big machete standing close by, and someone whose job it was to keep an eye on the feeders and the machete. And the minute someone got stuck in those rollers, they would take that machete and chop off the limb.
Good Lord.
Yes. They'd rather lose the arm than a life, because that human being with one arm can still get back to doing the work that lost them their arm to begin with. So it was very brutal, not just what they were inflicted on with punishment, the work itself was punishment.
And DC, how about the absentee slave owners? Like my family, like the Trevelyans, in Britain, we like to think that we didn't have slavery. In fact, in school, I was taught that we abolished slavery. Right. But the fact is that the British practically invented it.
The distance, the time away from the actual slave experience here in the Caribbean, I think allowed a lot of Europeans to feel detached from the actual slavery, but they certainly benefited from the wealth that went back from these plantations.
And the wealth was extraordinary. I mean, it wasn't just sugar, was it?
Well, there was sugar, there was cotton at one time, tobacco, cocoa, all of those products.
Rum.
But sugar, the products, the byproducts, yes, rum, of course, was a major byproduct. Sugar was, of course, the other one. I think there were maybe about a 20-year time frame in the 18th century where the consumption of sugar in England quadrupled.
Grenada's capital, St.
Right. So, DC, what are your comments here so far?
Well, I just want to quickly thank everyone for the hard work in putting this together and inviting me. I appreciate it. Nicole, Dr. Graves, thank you all very much. You know, I've spent 20 years in Texas researching injuries in health economics. And I've consumed a lot of data over the years, a lot of statistics, a lot of analytics. And I'll tell you, when I apply that mindset to the slave experience in the British West Indies, for example, Grenada, I see numbers that are just so shocking because, you know, yeah, we talk about the efficiency of the system, the windmills, the plantation system, the boiler houses, all of the mechanical artifacts of slavery that unfortunately we're not protecting well enough, because if we don't protect those, we're not protecting our history. And like Laura said, you know, the past informs the present that we currently live in. We still have the legacy of slavery with us, whether it's poverty, whether it's health, whether it's education. But when I look at the numbers and I compare those with other countries that experience this awful system, the United States in 1790 had 700,000 Africans enslaved in the US in 1790. By 1860, 70 years later, that population had grown to 4.4 million. Same as in Brazil, where 7 million slaves, African, were enslaved. In the Caribbean, in the British Caribbean, 2.4 million landed, were taken to these islands to work the fields. By the time of the abolition of slavery, the entire African population in the islands was down to about 800,000, 25% of the aggregate numbers transported here. It is awful. And when you think about the cost, when you think about the loss of limbs and all these things, it was not just the brutality of the punishment, it was the brutality of the work that took a significant toll on health, on psychology. I mean, there are numbers that say that if a plantation owner had a slave, productive slave for 10 years, he was fortunate. So the lifespan, the health, the brutality of the system speaks for itself. And I really, really want to see the islands, particularly Grenada too, protect some of those artifacts, because that's our history. We need to know more about it, and our visitors need to know more about it, because I believe that's how we'll get a groundswell of effort to address this reparation question. It's not a handout. It is justice. It's the morality of it. It's a robber robbing you, breaking your leg, and saying, okay, you're free to go now. And you see that robber the next day and said, I want my money back. And he says, hey, I told you were free to go. We're still limping on that broken leg. Economics, health, education, and so that's the legacy of slavery. And I know everyone here has hours they can talk about on any single topic that we have today, but I'll go ahead and end now.
Thank you very much, Angus. Thank you so much. That was a brainful. So it was about the Caribbean with enslavement and what we had in the Caribbean, greasing the engines of the Industrial Revolution to provide profit and to fund capitalism all over the world. This is what we are seeing. Angus, you can tell us a little bit about this financial gain and Britain's Industrial Revolution that basically funded by profits from enslavement.
Hi, guys. Thanks for having me on and being a part of this. I would say that after Grenada was a French colony, which the British took over after the 7 Years' War. And it was not the most lucrative colony under the French. The French had Guadeloupe and Martinique, and of course Haiti, Saint-Domingue. So when the British took over Grenada, they basically concentrated on sugar. So we go from about 80 plantations, sugar plantations, to over 134 in the early 1800s. So despite having the Ferrons Rebellion that basically disrupted production and destroyed plantations for a period of years, we do see that many planters, many absentee planters as well. The British, again, was a very absentee plantation management style compared to the French who were living in the islands. So you had managers in the islands managing the plantations, but a lot of the money and stuff going directly back to the UK, as Laura testifies about her family involvement. So we know that many of these planters, and we have some really prominent ones that were members of parliament as well, where the members of parliament protected their production basically in the Caribbean by making sure that the British military was in Grenada to protect these plantations. And they were in parliament to stop the abolitionists from ending the slave trade as early as they tried to in the 1790s. Also the stopping slavery, which didn't happen until 1833. So that involvement of these British planters, many of them Scottish as well, basically took all of these resources out of Grenada. And we're talking, you can take a ride across Grenada and you would see the ruins, the artifacts of sugar production, all the old water mills, stuck in time almost. These were, and Dunfermline is probably one of the interesting ones to get an interesting view of it that allows you to see such a small production area really, where the water wheel and the other facilities were. And that is where the production took place and where the majority of enslaved people would have labored. And that those resources were taken out of Grenada and sent directly to the UK. Grenada lost all of those resources decades after decades until the end of slavery and the end of sugar production, basically. And that went to build, and we know now that so much of these houses and properties that were owned back in the UK, one example is Paxton House, which Ninian Home built, which he bought, from another relative, but the resources came from his sugar production in Waltham Estate and Paraclete Estate, which he co-owned with another fellow Scot, Alexander Campbell. So we know that all of these resources were taken out of Grenada and built wealth, personal wealth for all of these plantation owners. That wealth built in the UK went into the economy of the UK and built up via the Industrial Revolution. And today we have beautiful cities in Europe, and in the Caribbean, we have very little to show for all of this production.
Thank you very much, Angus. Well said. So let me turn to the in-person panelists, and I'll begin with Tesfa to share her perspective on the profits, the Industrial Revolution, the use of the landscape, the use of enslavement to enrich the coffers of Britain, France, and the other colonial powers.
Thank you, Damian. Just to add to what Angus is speaking about, this information, you all, especially the fact that we have a very young audience with us, this information is readily available to you at a website that the University College London manages called the database on the legacies of British slavery database, right? And one of the most shocking things, I am a teacher also, so I teach in college back in Montreal. And one of the things that I did recently was use the database with my students to talk through the idea of reparations, to think about what it means to look at an island of Grenada that is 133 square miles, where there were 692 different estates on the island of Grenada. And the fact that we could trace who the people were, who the persons were, who were given compensation at the end of the period of enslavement in Grenada. And there's another part of the database that tells you where their descendants currently live in places like Britain, like Scotland, like the Netherlands, etc. So this is information that is readily available to you as well. This is precisely how this documentary unfolded. This is how this documentary came to be. Somebody in Britain decided, let me put my family name into the database and see what pops up. And what popped up was the fact that her family had ties to estates in Grenada and had profited off of slavery. So the case for reparations, which is what the function of this evening's conversation, is to really make a case for reparations. And it is writ large. When you get into the database on the legacies of slavery, you see, in plain you can see it. One of the things that I did with my students was just to look at Canada, because Canada has a reputation for having never been part of that barbarous trade, like it used to be called. Canada was heavily implicated in the transatlantic trade as well. There were thousands of Canadians, huge Canadian businesses. The Hudson Bay Company in Canada has direct ties to enslavement and estates in the Caribbean. So this case that we're making for reparations is, we're making it in the current context of Grenada, but it is a case that is there for you all, and I encourage you to get into that database. You can look at all kinds of information on Grenada, other parts of the Caribbean, and see for yourself why this case for reparations is being made.
Thank you very much. It's a case of reparations. It's the building of momentum and a movement of reparations to ensure that we get what we need, that we get the apology that we need. But landscape appears to have been a critical dimension of our history, a critical dimension of our story. How can we use it? We have students here. Kizzy, you're a teacher of history. How does landscape feature in terms of the teaching of history?
Good evening, everyone. I just want to support what DC said. He spoke about the importance of the landscape, and I cannot emphasize the importance of the landscape enough. We have to preserve our tangible heritage, our landscape, not just for our visitors, but more so for our students, our citizens, and I cannot stress that enough. For me, the landscape is of utmost importance in the teaching of history. When students are taken outdoors, they come face to face with the remnants of the past. And I think in the classroom, sometimes the students think what happened before was just a story, it's just a story. But when they go out there and they come face to face with the artifacts, the reality, then they are more convinced, it dawns on them that really and truly we have a past that was traumatic and totally destructive for the people who experienced it. I want to say that the past, the environment, the landscape, it leads to a deeper understanding and appreciation of the experiences of enslaved people. So when I take my students to River Antoine, or I take them to Belmont Estate, and they come face to face with the artifacts. So in the documentary, we saw the shackles. They are disturbed, and then it dawns on them really and truly, the enslaved Africans experienced a lot. I also want to say here that in the environment, emotions are evoked, and students are better able to empathize with the experiences of the enslaved people. So the landscape to teach and the preservation of our tangible heritage for our students is of utmost importance. And I hope following this discussion, we would make a better effort as a nation to preserve both our tangible and intangible heritage, not just for our visitors, but for our students. It is of utmost importance, and I want to stress that again, in education and in the teaching of history.
Thank you very much. Powerful, powerful. Thank you very much, Kizzy. A lot of passion here from both of you, a lot of passion from everyone indeed. But what a good segue into this recent documentary by the New York Times on Haiti. Haiti is a perfect example. And the New York Times very recently produced a documentary that is really heart-rendering on what happened in terms of enslavement and how that country, Haiti, actually contributed immeasurably to the enrichment and power of France today. Let me ask Laura to give us a little idea of that documentary, gives us some idea of that documentary and what resonates for her in terms of enslavement, the Industrial Revolution, the power of certain nations, and the impoverishment of our Caribbean societies.
Yes. Well, I must say, as someone who's reported from over the years in the aftermath of the devastating earthquake, the cholera epidemic that took hold on the island after the earthquake, it's always struck me how poor Haiti is compared to the Dominican Republic, which is the other half of the island. And I knew from my own reading that it was to do with Haiti period when it became the first independent slave nation in the Caribbean and the way that it was treated by France. I knew from my reading that that was something to do with Haiti's position. But this New York Times documentary and article, which I'd urge you all to look at, explains that, in fact, French demanded that Haiti pay them reparations to be a free nation, and that the impoverishment of Haiti today is directly related to the fact that the French insisted that they be paid reparations for Haiti's freedom. And this, of course, resonates with me because one of the reasons I wanted to make this documentary about Grenada was learning from that database we were just hearing about, the University College London database that was set up in 2013. It was only when that database was set up that our family discovered, through typing our names into it, that we had owned slaves on 7 different estates in Grenada. And that, in fact, when slavery was abolished in Britain in 1834, our family got the equivalent of £3 million. So this is the essential unfairness laid bare, that the enslaved, be they in Grenada or Haiti, got nothing. And those who had profited from the system of wealth extraction were actually paid in compensation for the loss of what was referred to as their property. So that fundamental unfairness goes a lot towards explaining the relative economic situations today.
Thank you very much, Laura. So in essence, the planters at the time were compensated for the loss of profit and the loss of property. But the enslaved were left to fend for themselves. That is the essence of the story. This is the takeaway message. So when we want to shape our history and we want to shape our past and we want to craft our past in terms of looking at the present and shaping the future, the teaching of history becomes critical. How is history taught? How can we get our students to appreciate history as a subject that is equal to or even more important than math, physics, chemistry? As a young man going to school, if I said to my friends that I'm doing history, they say, oh, history. And they say, I ask, okay, so what do you think is the most important? They say, physics, chemistry, additional mathematics. The mindset has to change because the history is part of us. It's our heritage. It's part of our culture. It's part of who we are, even in our DNAs as part of our functioning personalities. And therefore, it cannot be ignored. In fact, there should be a movement that agitates that history should be taught in every school at every level up to university, because it's a means of understanding ourselves as Caribbean people. And there has to be a movement on that. And there must not be a choice between history and French or history and physics, because I had the hard choice of choosing history over physics. That should not happen anymore. So I want to turn to Kizzy. In terms of the teaching perspective, Kizzy, tell us about the reactions of students to the topic of slavery, and tell us how you approach the teaching of this topic.
Students experience many, many different emotions when I teach. Some anger, some students are scandalized, some dismay, some disgust. But I think more so students are affected by the tremendous amount of violence that existed, the high levels of mortality and violence that existed during the Middle Passage and on Caribbean sugar plantations. I like to think that my classes, there are places of freedom where the students have an opportunity. I see some of my students in the audience, so I believe there are places of freedom where my students really have the opportunity to engage with history content in a critical way. I ask a lot of probing questions. I believe that my students must co-create knowledge with me. So I give them opportunities to speak and to really express themselves, to really say how they feel about enslavement and what was done to their ancestors. So I would say that I approach history, the teaching of history, in a very critical way. My students engage in a lot of reflective thinking. They have opportunities to think, peer, share. I also take them out of the classroom whenever I have the opportunity. I spoke before about landscape, and it's a real life practice because I believe that they have to see to really empathize and understand the experiences of enslaved people. So another thing that I do is I allow them to formulate a lot of questions. So not just think, but, share their thoughts, formulate questions, and question me. And so the classroom must be a place of engagement. As history teachers, we must not practice education for banking, but education for mining, okay? Extract from the students, get them to think as people of African descent, and really we must co-create as educators knowledge with them. And that's my approach.
That's powerful. And I know Tesfa is itching.
Yes, I see that I have a fellow Fierian on the panel, right? We believe in the pedagogies of the oppressed, right? And in teaching to transgress. As Bell Hooks said, that the classroom is a collaborative space and that we co-create knowledge together. Absolutely. One of the things that I have found in my classroom to be really useful in speaking to students about these historical contexts is to help them to understand that the systems that we inhabit, even to this day, so our health systems, our banking systems, right, our education systems are direct inheritance of our colonial systems, right? They are what I refer to as relations of coloniality. So the fact that I'm sitting here in front of you, for example, pretending to be an expert about reparations, is a relation of coloniality. This is how the British education system said that we should set it up, right? Ideally, we should be sitting around a pot of oil right now sharing information, right? You telling me what you know about history, I telling you what I know, and we're co-creating knowledge together, right? But somewhere along the line, we inherited an education system that said the 3 R's, reading, writing, and arithmetic, right? And that's the way that we do education. And so when we're thinking reparations, we're also thinking about those systems that we have inherited as a result and that we still today inhabit I just gave you an example of one, right? The fact that our food systems are a direct result of your oil down is colonialism in a pot. You know that, right? Oil down is what was fed to our enslaved ancestors, right? Really salted meat because it had to be transported from way across the world before it got to Grenada. Breadfruit, right, which was readily available and full of carbohydrates, and so we could extract maximum labor from a body that was feeding on breadfruit, right? And all the others that we added in from our indigenous ancestors and so on. So even in our food systems, and we see people dying from diseases related to food consumption, right? And so when we're talking reparations, we're also talking about health. We're talking about repairing our food systems, repairing these systems that we have inherited as part of our colonial past. And I think that's one of the ways that students really resonate with the information about history.
Yes. Repairing our systems is the word of the night. Repair is the phrase of the night. And repairing our systems in terms of also the mind. Because we have to change our mindsets. Can we, and I ask you a question as I seek to engage you. Can you know yourself without knowing your past? And can you build your future without knowing the past? What did Marcus Garvey say? A people without a history. A people without a history. Thank you very much. It's like a tree without the root. So what we are seeking to do now, tonight, is to provide that tree with some fertilizer and some water, to allow the roots to flourish. And the roots have to be you, the students, you, the young people, because we believe it is important to ignite the young minds of people. Our role is to ignite the young minds of our Caribbean citizenry to be able to do what needs to be done in the future. And this is a good way, a good segue then, into the documentary snippet on Mr. Hankey's comments. And I want you to pay particular attention to this as we again launch the discussion emanating from this particular epic snippet. Thank you.
Just steps away from the market where the enslaved were once sold is another prompt from the past. The name Hankey is well known on Grenada, and my family owned slaves on this island in partnership with a Mr. Hankey. He was our agent. Freed slaves often took the names of their masters, so it's possible that my relatives owned the ancestors of the Mr. Hankey who runs the store today. It's so nice to meet you.
It took a bit of persuasion before Mr. Hankey would speak to me. It's disconcerting when a complete stranger turns up to ask about the past.
I'm just curious to know if it's possible that my relatives owned your ancestors.
There is a possibility. There is a possibility.
But if it was the case that we were linked by history, what would you think of that?
That's deep. That's deep.
Do you think it's fair that my family got money when slavery was abolished, but the slaves here in Grenada got nothing?
No, not at all. It wasn't fair. I believe that the slaves were the hard workers. They are the ones that should really get some form of compensation.
There was a lot to reflect on after I'd met Mr. Hankey and the students and seen the plantations. As a schoolgirl, I'd been taught that Britain led the world in abolishing the slave trade. My history lessons glossed over how Britain's empire profited from slavery for centuries before abolition. And the cost of abolishing slavery was staggering. Compensating families like mine for the loss of what was called their property cost Britain's government £20 million in 1834, but the slaves received nothing.
Thank you very much. How did that grab you? What resonated with you? So it was about compensation. Let me turn over to DC and Angus. Your thoughts on that experience?
Just quickly, I might add to the 20 million that Laura mentioned. 20 million pounds was paid to the plantation owners, nothing to the slaves, which is quite true. The equivalent today would be about $17 billion. But what's not often heard is that the planters actually thought they were worth much more than that. To give the slaves freedom, they wanted 40 million pounds, which would have been closer to 35 or 40 billion dollars in today's money. At that time, that 20 million pounds was the equivalent of 40% of the UK's budget. 40%. Initially, the planters wanted 80%. That's the value when we talk about the extraction of wealth. You put a dollar sign or a pound sign next to it, that's the wealth we're talking about that caused so much human suffering and death and left a legacy of poverty, poor health, and economic substandard economic development here in our islands.
Thank you very much, DC. What about you, Angus? So, your thoughts?
I think it's the reason we're here today is because nothing was done after slavery ended. There was no compensation paid, or at least something to be able to make people transition from a life of enslavement to a life of freedom. And I think one of the things, the system, the way it was set up, the apprenticeship system and some of the laws that were created was to basically bind the former enslaved onto the plantations to continue to labor. There really was not any intention to really alter the system to any large degree to change the lives of the former enslaved. It was believed, though, they wanted to keep them on the plantations working. Of course, many of the former enslaved did not want to continue in the same position. They wanted to go off on their own and farm and own their own property and things like that. So in America, you hear the talk is about 40 acres and a mule. It was something that was floated. You know, had that been done, America would have been a far different place than what it is today. And in the case of the Caribbean, had any sort of money, and even a small bit of money, had been given as compensation for the enslaved people, it would have totally changed the landscape of Grenada today in terms of economics of the descendants of former enslaved people. So I think that's why we're having this discussion is because that compensation went to the plantation owners. Many of them were in the UK, but there were quite a few owners in Grenada as well. We tend not to talk about the Grenadians who got compensation because we look at the large families in the UK that got, you know, thousands of pounds because they owned the larger sugar plantations. But there were lots of enslaved people that were owned by Grenadians, just everyday Grenadians. Had one or two or just a handful of enslaved people that I think we also need to look at as well and recognize that this was such an embedded system. You know, we do need to take a look at that and the implications of all of it. So I think the reason we're here today is because nothing was done then. There was not even a gesture in any way to make the transition from enslavement to freedom even possible on any decent scale. When you look at Grenada in the end of 1800s or the early 1900s, the conditions of the majority of Grenadians were not that different from when they were enslaved on the plantation. The houses they were living in, the health system or the lack thereof that they did not have access to. You realize that for the next 100 years, most Grenadians really were still in a similar situation that they were in, except the fact that they were now free, but they did not have the resources to really change their situation.
Thank you very much, Angus. So, is it too difficult for us to ask for compensation today as part of our development project for the region of the Caribbean? Is it too much to ask for compensation with regard to our education system, our health system, basically, and all of those things that we need to give us the lift in terms of our developmental thrust in the Caribbean. But maybe this is a good time to talk about the students again. We have a lovely episode within the documentary where Laura engages the students of St. Joseph's Convent. Can we get that snippet, please? And then we will ask Laura to comment on that experience and to ask the audience a very pertinent question. Please proceed with the snippet. Thanks.
So good afternoon again, girls. Today we want to chat about the legacy of slavery, and we want to talk about reparations. So in terms of treatment, the slaves basically, there would have been specific laws, all right? And one of the things we must understand is that they were chattel slaves. And that means, what does chattel slavery mean? They're perfect. Personal property, all right? Now, if they're considered personal property, it means that they have no rights, absolutely no rights. So, this is Laura Trevelyan. Now, one of the things about Laura is that she found, not too long ago, that her
5 times great-grandfather
5 times great-grandfather was a slave owner
here.
in Grenada.
So this is my question. In 1834, almost 200 years ago, my family received the equivalent of £3 million in today's money when slavery was abolished. The 1,000 slaves that we owned here in Grenada got nothing. Do you think that my family should pay money in reparations to the people of Grenada? Can you raise your hand if you think that's a good idea? That seems to be unanimous, yes. Nicole. Can I ask how many of you are descended from slaves? Do you know?
I think everybody.
After class, I sat down with the students to find out more about their views on reparations and the legacy of slavery on Grenada.
It's not only just in the infrastructure or the systems, but it's also in the mind of everyone, just general Grenadian citizens. We kind of have this victimizing mindset about, oh, this thing happened to us, and so now we're struggling instead of trying to get ourselves out of it.
Even though the whole, a majority of Grenada is black, the population is mainly black, there is still a lot of racism and colorism. And I think these things pass down from the minds of parents who have taught their children these things.
Thank you very much. So over to you, Laura. Let me give you an opportunity to engage directly our students in the gathering.
Thank you very much, Damian, and thank you to all the students for being here. And I should say that the students at St. Joseph's were just amazing, and I was so impressed by their graciousness in receiving me and their openness. So I have a question for all of you students who've given your time this evening, and thank you for that, by the way. And I wish that I was with you in person and not thousands of miles away. But my question to you is, if you can answer it, it's difficult, but how does it feel for all of you who are descended from slaves to be in contact with me, a descendant of slave owners who own slaves on Grenada? Can I ask how that feels to you? Because to me, I'm just so grateful to all of you for receiving me graciously, but I wonder how it feels for you.
Right. It's your turn now, students. What did you say? The two of you spoke about co-creating history, co-creating the story, co-creating the knowledge. Here's an opportunity. Who wants to go first? Who draws first blood? A la Sylvester Stallone. Who's going first? I know I started you off and you were very, very talkative in a positive way. You had a lot to say. Can you pose the question again, Laura?
Yes,
Please.
well, maybe as there are two educators there next to you, Damian, they can help, because I know that they would be able to guide this discussion. But I guess my question is, what do you all think about the fact that here we are connected, even though it's virtually, you descendants of slaves and me, a descendant of slave owners on Grenada? A hopeful moment. Does that mean something? Does it mean that maybe we can move forward with this?
Oh, I thought you had your hand up. I'm sorry. Right. Who is ready to go?
There's no wrong answer, right?
Yeah. Very good. Take my mic. Maybe you can moderate the rest of the session.
Good night, everybody. I'm a little bit frightened. For me, I feel a little bit to say sad because we didn't get nothing, even though we did all the work, even though we put in our sweat, we was not fed enough, we was ill-treated, a little we get diseases, some of us die. It made us feel bad. I don't know for the others, but it made me feel bad. And I hope how do we do? I'll COVID check. For me, if you come in person, I won't ill treat you. I won't say anything disgusting to you because we all are humans. We do make mistakes, and
Very good. Thank you so much for starting the ball rolling. Anybody else? Yes. I wanted to begin with this.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone, students, teachers, everybody, and good evening again to able and astute panel. I'm Sarafina. I'm very proud of you today, my student. I want to take my time because I tend to get very passionate about the issue of slavery. And now we have the question of reparations. And sometimes when I think about it and I start talking, I start stammering. So I want to take my time. The question of reparations is a very complex one, and one that should be given much thought, all right? Because to answer the first question, should reparations be given to us or should reparations be paid? Yes. But it is a complex question, and there needs to be much deliberation with what we as descendants are asking for for reparations. As I was sitting here listening to the panel, I just thought of our Westminster system. I thought of our EC dollar. I thought of our education system. I thought of our parents, grandparents, now living, are plagued with chronic non-communicable disease like diabetes and hypertension because of breadfruit, because of salt meat, and and our health has been affected immensely. And our healthcare system, sadly, in Grenada, cannot support some of the illnesses that we are now faced with. And unfortunately, it is ever present, you know. I also think about our young people, where slavery has now become psychological, where I watch young ladies, especially, and young men too, when they have a skin tone as mine, filled with melanin, they think it is wise to rip the melanin content out of their skin by bleaching. It is very evident in our country, and it is even more pronounced in Jamaica. And that is because we, even as parents, and maybe the ordinary people on the street, would cast these comments. This nice little brown-skinned girl, right? Yes. Yes. This nice little brown-skinned girl. And we are quick to associate beauty and purity with white, and associate bad and evil with black. And sometimes we begin to hate ourselves and do a lot of destructive things to ourselves. So the issue of reparation is a resounding yes, but we have to be very, very careful in what we are requesting when we're asking for reparations. And money will be very nice because we need lots of it, but money is not all, because when you are looking at the far-reaching effects that slavery has caused, money simply is not enough. All right? So I hope that the committee responsible for reparations for slavery will be very, very careful in what we are requesting for Grenada or the Caribbean at large. And I feel very happy that the conversation has begun. I feel very happy that when I look in the room, it's almost filled, right? But I also feel saddened that despite all the negativity that happened during slavery, and despite the fact that we have suffered a lot from it, unfortunately, we did not take some positives. I know now you're going to say, okay, well, maybe she's getting crazy. But we have, at some point, removed ourselves from agriculture, because after slavery ended, everybody wanted it better for their children, and they wanted education for their children, as they should, don't get me wrong. But agriculture has been somewhat abandoned at some point, all right? And if we look carefully, we realize that the very planters would have made millions and billions of dollars from that same agriculture. And that agriculture was based mainly at first on one crop. And then later it was diversified, right? Now, if we put the same energies into agriculture, we would realize that we can make our country, our island, and the islands of the Caribbean more sustainable, all right? So it is not, sometimes bad things could open our eyes to positives as well, all right? So I want everybody to really look at slavery in a very, very, very critical manner, and not just think it was all bad. Yes, it was mostly bad, right? But there was some things that we should take, some lessons that we should take from it, and not just not give it much thought, for lack of a better word. And while I'm speaking about agriculture, when, to be quite honest
You're
with
all
you,
over the place, man.
I'm sorry? Sorry, that. Anyhow, while I was speaking about agriculture, I lost my trend of thought.
All right, we'll get back to you on that one. But thank you very much.
No, I'm not finished. I'm not finished. My main things, the main things that I think should be that we should focus on is helping our young people to acknowledge the importance of our history, and for them to constantly see the historical trajectory between the past, present, and the future. All right? And when we teach, as my very learned colleague was speaking about, we have to constantly bring those things to our students. I'm sorry, but I really lost my train of thought with that little interruption, but thank you.
But thanks very much for your contribution. Yes. So our panelists would like to make, our two panelists said, I'm not sure if our panelists online would want to also make a contribution to the two contributions that have been made.
We have students.
Yes, let's keep it rolling with the students before we make contributions.
Yes.
So, Oliver.
I am neutral about the situation. I don't blame Miss Laura for her actions of her ancestors. I am happy that she is trying to make an effort to make a change towards the children in my country. Thank you.
I'm a little nervous, so if I stutter, don't bother. At first, I believe we were all a little skeptical as we were meeting an descendant of a possible slave owner. But personally, I don't think that we hold Miss Laura accountable for the actions of her ancestors, as she cannot control that. But we are very happy that she's acknowledged that what they did was wrong, and she's willing to put effort into possibly erasing some of the damage that has been caused. Thank you.
All right, good evening. Sorry that I reached to place late because I was trying to see whether we could once again have our National Museum open. The name here is Michael Jessamy. I'm a student also of history. Maybe too, I can ask somebody a question or ask everybody inside here a question. Who in this room here has ever been arrested because of the color of the skin? Can I see a hand up? All right. My other good colleague on the other side of the fence, Angus Martin, is out there. So we had our discussion, we had our natter, and I told him I'm going to blaze him tonight for a good or bad reason on behalf, maybe, of the country. And it's good that we have a lot of students here because it's this thing, maybe it's good we have started discussion. It's good that we have the students here so that we need to impart to this young generation a number of things. I hear people on Friday night, we culture. I listen to some of the clips from the very video, and some are not accurate. And let us get this. I don't want us to be too passionate, but we have to be realistic. Yes, reparation, yes, but what are we reparating? Are we reparating dollars? Are we reparating, or are we creating the conditions, the enabling environment that our young people know who they are, where they came from, and what we need to get this country of ours going? We have to be not passionate, but sober about it. We also had a king, an African king, living in Grenada. Not so? Senator Abigail? Yeah, speak after me. Where was that person living? No? King Jaja. He lived in River Road. And Bumpy Griffith's wife is a descendant of King Jaja. The sad thing is that if we want to get our history, if you want to go and get your birth paper of your grandmother, you have to go to the Mormons. Not in Grenada, not at the registry. When I have to do research, I have to go to England and France. We have Angus Martin out there. Angus Martin is in New York flying down to Sabre to get a little kakada, because we don't see it fit that he should be given $500 to be in Grenada, although he's out there getting his doctorate from Leiden University on something to Grenada. So when we do not understand where we came from, and the all down you spoke about there, we could go a different route with it as well. But again, too, we don't speak about or chenep, or sugar apple, or batata, or sweet potato. We don't speak about chamflo. We don't speak about cassava manioc, the yams. They are names of places in Grenada from the Amerindians. So, yes, reparation. So if Angus Martin cannot make a living in Grenada, but he is out there as a big historian, then where are we? Where is that history? If you cannot go in the registry and get your birth paper, and if you can't go and get something, and we are happy, my colleague here, we want to rename places and things. I have no problem. But do not take Melville Street and call it something else. Because Melville Street was not what Melville Street. What was the name of Melville Street? Water Street. And what was the name of Tantin, or the meaning of Tantin? Land along the water edge. And Tempe, the rich valley before the sea. And Mount Parnassus, the mountains where the gods muse, the gods of love, the gods of drama, Bacchanal, Bacchus. And then we have Pikachu, or some kind of thing, the flying horses and all those kind of stuff. And where they came together? At Mount Helicon. So you have Mount Helicon. So there's a lot that we can go. But unless we in Grenada prepare, because we have thousands and thousands of artifacts, miles of documents on Grenada, because Grenada was the third most important colony in the entire, both British and French. We managed all that, even down to Suriname. Interesting enough, my wife is Surinamese. So I left Grenada, although we have the Bellefontaine who left before slavery and all those kind of things like that. And she also is from the African, the Dombi tribe, and from the Jombi chief. So we merged that two different. And someone spoke about the landscape. And this good lady here spoke a lot as well too. We have to make that repatriation in Grenada, because all the documents are out there. There's not a sense of history. We have no national heroes. But don't just call some place after somebody for something. What's the meaning? Because after some time, somebody will change it. So when A.C. George They wanted to name a place after him. He said, no, give me a virgin place. Likewise, when they wanted to name Cuthbert Peter's Park after Kirani, he said, no. We have to create systems, structures, and all those kind of things. Things are not just flying like a reed. You can go to the same Bible when I told you the Africans were taken over and brought to a place with sails, and yes, they'll come back. There are a lot. But we have to ground those things. So sometimes it's good to work with the children, but most times children. No, let us lay that foundation and then let's speak. You don't lay it, but please be silent.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Very, very passionate. The only thing I will beg you to, so that we can get as many people to speak as possible, if we can keep our comments a little short and crisp, because I really want to hear from as many people as possible. But I do appreciate what you have said so far and the passion that you have exuded in making those pronouncements. So let's get as many people as possible.
Yes, good
sir.
afternoon to all. I heard the young lady spoke about the reparations and make sure it's carefully done. But it's well planned. There's a 10-point action plan, just to make something known. 10-point action plan which says state full formal apology, repatriation, indigenous people development programs, cultural institutions, public health crisis, illiteracy eradication, African Knowledge Program, psychological rehabilitation, technology transfer, and debt cancellation. This is it. That's a 10-point action plan. The CRC, the CARICOM Reparation Committee, and the GNRC, Grenada National Reparation Committee, has put together. So it's something well organized. It's not just money, but it's bigger than just money. Yeah. And to the Laura, well, we appreciate your courage and your strength to come forward and say that your family directly had connection with slaves in Grenada, over 1,000 slaves, and you would like to meet people here. We would like to meet you as well to have a good discussion and learn more. Thank you much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the articulation of the 10-point plan coming from the Caribbean Reparations Commission, and Grenada, of course, is involved in that. Can we hear from some others, please? Yes, yes, sir.
Okay, so good evening again. You know, as Ms. Cadet said, this is one of the things I try to do most with my students, to try to get them to express how they feel about the topic. But one of the things, you know, reparation, I think is most important is how do we get our children to move up away from the idea that somebody owes us something for something that has been done to us? How do we get them to believe that I should use this as a stepping stone to be even greater than they think I can be? And you know, I see it as if it wasn't for slavery, where would I have been? And so, yes, the ills were done, but it created, I don't want to say perfection, but it created me. And so, you know, when I was growing up, it was believed that when you saw a white person, you felt that the first thing that was attached to them was wealth. So you treated them a certain way. But then when I learned more and I got to know more, I recognized we're all equal. We're all equal, and color doesn't determine your wealth. It's what you do with yourself, how determined you are to make it. And so, you know, I believe reparation is all well, but getting our black brothers and sisters to believe that they could be anything they want to be without the assistance of a white man. And so to Laura, I feel the same way I feel about my brothers, my black brothers and sisters. We are all equal. And so when I see her, I see her as a human being, one who's probably linked to mistakes, but we're all humans.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very. It's okay. Thank you very much. Well said. I have to be careful how I speak, because if I speak too loudly, the mic might react violently. All right. So anybody else? Yes, sir.
Yeah. I'm not a learned man, as you folks say. But what I think should start with this reparation, you beginning here, is that the generation, the young and the middle age, should have a tour of Grenada to see the actual slave pen. Not come in here and just talk and not let people feel and see it. They should visit the schools, talk to the schools. Let it bring from kindergarten right up, so they will know more, because you see this shackle in certain slave pen in Grenada here. And this should be done before we start this thing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. But I know some of our teachers have been doing that. So let me turn it over. Right down, yes. So let me turn it over to our panelists now that you're beginning to think again, because I haven't seen hands. Let me turn it over to the panelists, but for the first opportunity to find how she feels. Thank you. To find out how she feels about the responses that have been provided thus far, and then we take it to the other panelists. Laura, are you there?
Yeah, thank you. Well, I just want to thank everyone for speaking so courageously and so directly. It's very meaningful to me to hear everything that you have to say, and very moving. And I guess what I would say in response is that after the documentary, my family in England, which is a big family, they all got together on Zoom without me, actually, because as they said, Laura, you've had your say. We want to have a say without you. So they all got together to debate amongst themselves what the responsibility of our family is. And I should say that, you know, there's not wealth in the Trevelyan family in England, but there is definitely social standing. Anyway, so they're trying to draft some kind of a statement on behalf of the family to express what they feel. And I don't know what that is, but I wanted to let you know that they're all, you know, very moved, and they also believe that the past informs the present, but they don't quite know what to do with the information. So I think they're trying to draft something which acknowledges the hurt that our family inflicted on Grenada in the past, is what they're trying to do. But for myself, separately, next year when I'm 55, I'll be a pensioner, believe it or not, and I will come into some money. And that money that I'm into, I want to do something useful for the people of Grenada. And I was very inspired by the students that I met at St. Joseph's. I asked them, you know, if I could put money towards education in Grenada, would they like that? And they said that they would, because education provides opportunity. So I don't know if you all agree with that, you youngsters who are there. I'd like to know what you think. So I'm just thinking about that, the best way to do that next year. You can hold me to it, because I'll be 55 next August, so you can all get back in touch with me and ask me what I've done. But I will tell you, because I will have figured it out. And the other thing I wanted to say was, because I have 3 boys, 2 of them are in college. And I've gone through the college process with the 2 that are in college. And if anybody wants to apply to college in the United States and needs a hand with their application, I would be delighted to help as a college counselor, because I feel I have a lot of experience. And actually, I could draft my sons as well. So you have to let me know if anybody wants to go to college in the States and apply this fall, and you need someone to help with your application, or you would like someone to help with it, then I volunteer. And my email is trevelyanlaura@yahoo.com. Nicole has all my coordinates, but it's my last name followed by my first name, all one word, at yahoo.com is my personal email. So you can email me if you want to apply to college in the States.
Thank you very much, Laura. Thank you very much. Angus and DC, would you like to make a contribution at this point in time? I understood that there are people online who would like to ask questions, so I want to give them an opportunity as well. Mr. Oliver, are they ready to ask those questions? let's give them an opportunity first, and the panel can come in later. How do we access those questions, Mr. Oliver? Because I don't have anything online.
Good evening.
Go ahead, please, Dr. Bub.
Dr. Damian Dublin. Same name with you, it seems.
Okay. Go ahead.
Good evening. Nice to see you. Good evening. I'm Dr. Damian Dublin from Dominica. I'm chair of the Dominica Reparations Committee and also a member of the CARICOM Reparations Committee. So the Grenada Reparations Committee is a sister committee, and we collaborate on events and activities. Let me commend the organizers of this event. It's very, very important to have this narrative and dialogue at this time coming from Africa Day, and to see the students being part of it. That is where we have to get it rolling. I just wanted to put some things in perspective quickly. Dominica's situation was almost similar to Grenada, where actually the slave owners received 275,547 pounds, the slave owners, and the 14,175 former slaves received nothing at all up to this present time. Nothing. Now, part of the reparations movement, very importantly in 2013, a very, very important decision was taken by CARICOM to form the CARICOM Reparations Commission, which is chaired by Sir Hilary Beckles. I mean, everybody should know Sir Hilary Beckles, historian. He just wrote a very important book that people should try to get. It's called How Britain Underdeveloped the Caribbean. This one is something probably the educators and the students should get. In terms of the reparations, I just want to tell us that reparations is a just and ethical cause, because all what was said actually justified it. Where work was done, people were compensated, and the people who were the generators of the wealth were not. No, this could only happen because chattel slavery or property was actually legalized. So it was a whole system, the legal system, the banking system, the insurance system. So that's the only way they could have gotten paid, is because they were deemed as property. Now, in legal terms, once you're property and somebody take it from you, then they have to be compensated. Now, in terms of the way forward, I hear some people mention about the monetary aspect, but CARICOM has developed what we call a 10-point plan. I think it would be wise for, when you have some time, look up CARICOM Reparations Commission or CARICOM or the Center for Reparations Research. And this 10-point plan is the template which guides all the national reparations committees like Grenada, Dominica, Antigua. Basically, the first thing we're asking for is a formal apology. Can you imagine that? Just that simple thing we cannot get. We have written to Britain and France and and none of them yet have accepted that they did it wrong. Because reparation, in a sense, is repairing whatever damage was done. So that formal apology is the first thing, and because they realize if they apologize formally, the expressions of regret, but not that formal apology to guide them. No, it's not about monetary. All the aspects, Damian mentioned some of them, the question of the education, repatriation, the question of the health system, the psychological aspect. So it's actually 10 points which encompass our development, which would give us that impetus and that lift so that we ourselves can do it. We're not saying that we just drop money on us, but support all the other aspects so we ourselves can get what is due. And I want to leave a word with us that this reparation struggle is justified. People may think, oh, it's so long it happened, forget about it. But I'll tell you, the Jews are getting reparations up to this present time from Germany, up to this present time. So it comes down to our level of organization and commitment to the cause, and knowing that that struggle is a struggle that's going to help in terms of our present day development model, and that reparations falls nicely into it. So it's nice to be part of this. Grenada is a place I've been to a few times. I always, even in times of Maurice Bishop, I've been to Grenada around these times, and it's a place I always feel comfortable in. Caribbean people. So it's nice to see at least that kind of discussion. And let me thank the panelists and even the lady who made the documentary. It's good to see at least from that point that she recognized, but probably I would suggest that she can play a role too in reaching out to the government and the other people. She can play a role from that in terms of advocacy and bringing the message to the people where it matters. So I'm enjoying it. I just wanted to share this and I'm really enjoying it. And I want to thank everybody who made this possible. So all discussion, any points made there is important. And feel free to just give your views and be part of this movement and just read up a little more on it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Damian, my namesake. Thank you so much. I'm conscious of time because there are people who have to travel as far as Grenville, and I think we should be wrapping up now. But I want to give our chair of the Grenada Reparations Commission an opportunity to give a plug to what that commission is doing. Can you please help us with that, Mr. Ali Gill? And then we get some final words from our panelists, and we call it a very, very fruitful and gainful night.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. Just briefly, to thank everyone for coming up, but a few important points. And Brother Rochelle Charles Rastafarian is a member of our Reparations Committee, and he pointed out the 10-point plan, CARICOM 10-point plan. I would not belabor that. So that answers the question with regards to persons thinking that the reparations struggle in the Caribbean is not well planned or thought out. It is well planned and thought out and has been ongoing since 2013. Secondly, to the history teacher and persons I have heard saying that they're not certain where they would have been had it not been for slavery. And I find that a rather curious question. Fundamentally, the transatlantic slave trade and slavery was crimes against humanity. When we speak of Flippers Hill and the fallacy that the Caribs leapt to their death and committed suicide, it is the genocide of the Kalinago people who we learn that they refer to as the Caribs that we're speaking about. The Caribs and the Arawaks were wiped out by the Europeans. That is our history. So that we in the Caribbean must understand that our history did not begin on the plantations here in the Caribbean. And we are not descendants of slaves. We are descendants of enslaved people, but of Africans. And our glorious history began as free people in Africa, where we had developed universities, mathematics, civilizations. We come from a great past. So that's where we would have been had it not been for the interruption of the Atlantic slave trade and slavery. So that it's absolutely important that we are clear about that. Our history did not begin on the plantations here in the Caribbean. And just to respond to Mr. Jessamy briefly, no one is advocating the renaming of streets and villages and communities in any unstructured manner. Melville Street, Sandal Tunnel, and you name it. These are the names of colonizers, governors, plantation owners, slave owners. And we as independent Grenadians have a right to determine the names of our streets and our villages and our communities without no apology. Those points must be absolutely clear, comrades. Students, and I always refer to the biblical teaching of Jesus Christ creating us in his own image and likeness. All we ask here in Grenada is for we name the streets and so on of persons who have sacrificed for the development of this country in our own image and likeness. I just want to thank you. I think the discussion on reparations is good. We are creating the awareness. The sisters who are here with us, we are looking for volunteers and more persons to join the struggle. The Rastafarian brothers and sisters who are here. The Rastafarians have blazed this trail for years. For years. And all we are doing now is joining the Rastafarians and emboldening the struggle for reparative justice. So thank you, brothers and sisters.
Thank you. We will have some final words, just about 30 seconds. Each panelist, I'll begin with those who are virtual, 30 seconds or 20 to 30 seconds. Let's begin with you, Laura, the star of the documentary. Laura? Laura has left?
I think that the people of Grenada were the star, and I just want to thank you all for welcoming me this evening. I want to say how impressed I was by all of the questions from the students, and I just want to say for my own part as a journalist, it's strange to be thought of as an advocate, and I don't really think of myself that way. I more think that, as the writer Virginia Woolf said, if you can't tell the truth about yourself, you can't tell the truth about other people. And so how can you be a journalist in this day and age and not confront your own past? So thank you all for helping me to confront it. And it's my hope that some of the other 46,000 families who received compensation in 1834 in Britain might just also try to think about what that means today. And I hope to see you all in Grenada soon, and I hope that any students who want to reach out to me will, and thank you all for the opportunity to be here this evening.
Thank you very much, and we wish you a speedy recovery. DC, it's your turn, 30 seconds.
Yeah, just real quickly, I want us to maybe take a second look at some of the words that we've grown up with. Freedom. Look what freedom meant for the enslaved when they were let off the plantation. Was that truly free? Think about independence. When we think about independence, when Jamaica was independent, became independent in 1962, 85% of the population functionally illiterate after 200 years of colonialism and another 200 years of slavery. Independence to some of these Caribbean countries probably mean more that we have gotten everything we need from you, now you're on your own. So this is where the struggle begins. We need to be able to revisit the past, understand how we got to where we are today, and find the resolutions, because I believe we could do that with this kind of activity and passion and knowledge. I think we can begin that effort.
Thank you very much. Angus, 30 seconds.
I would definitely like to give my plug for education, teaching of history in schools, support the teachers. I think we definitely need more education in the school system, more knowledge about Grenada's history, and definitely from a landscape perspective. I think history all over the world is becoming less and less emphasized. But I think we need to take the initiative in Grenada to teach people about the landscape that they grew up with, that's all around them, and really learn about the history. You know, I wonder how many young people know what Fedon's Camp is all about. How many people have gone to Fedon's Camp? So I think we have a lot to do in that respect. Also, I would just like to make one shout out to the Reparations Committee is going to be involved in lots of different activities, and we welcome people to volunteer for these different committees. One of them we're going to be working on is looking at the place names in Grenada and proposing the change of some of these names. So we would like people who want to volunteer to also contact the Reparations Committee to become part of making some of these changes that we want to see in our landscape in Grenada.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Kizzy, 30 seconds.
To respond quickly before I close to my colleague from Grenville Secondary, she spoke about the lessons of the past, and there are some lessons that our students need to learn. Our ancestors were exploited, but you must not become exploiters. You must learn the lessons of the past, use the experiences of our ancestors to inform the present and the future. I just wanted to say that. Additionally, we must, as educators, fulfill the true purpose of history, which is, again, to help our students apply the lessons of the past to solve current and future issues. And so I hope, too, the governments of Europe would to apply the lessons of the past and put some serious socio-economic programs in place to benefit us people of African descent, really to help us overcome some of the challenges that we face. And I think to do so would be right and just.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Tesfa? 30 seconds.
Thank you. I want to end with the groundings by the great Walter Rodney. He said, there's no way to pursue intellectual life if you don't know how to get on the ground as an intellectual. It has to be community. When Walter Rodney went to sit down with Rastafari said, Walter Rodney, you're a child. You come to learn from Rastafari, right? And this is where we are. This is where we stand in community, right? That we are learning from each other about this story of reparations, right? And so reparations is everybody's business in Grenada, and it needs to be grounded in the work that is already being done in community. This reparations project is not a project being run in abstract away from Grenadian communities. We're interested in what our students have to say, in what our Rastafari elders have to say, in what our elders have to say, in what our cultural practitioners have to say about what they see as the reparations project for Grenada. So this is a project that is ongoing. It's in its advocacy phase, and we keep asking for people to join up, to be a part of it. And the last thing I want to share for all of you wonderful students who came to be with us this evening, there's a wonderful book that's been put out by the University of the West Indies Press. It's called An Introduction to Reparation for Secondary Schools. And you need to get on that book. You need to get on that book, right? Reparations is your business, you all. It's your future, and it's your time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. To all of the panelists, to the University of the West Indies Open Campus, Grenada, West Indies, to the Grenada Reparations Commission, from me to you, thank you very much. It's about reparations. It's about compensation. It's about enslavement. The struggle continues. Get home slavery. Thank you very much.